tell us a little bit about your starting point growing up and how you found yourself in this industry, and then again, by the grace of God, eventually left it.
Yeah, I love that you are passionate about equipping fathers. Father myself, so I'm a father of 4 boys, and just looking at this world, it's like, hey, how can we equip these children to become men that not only know what they need to be wary of, but how do they advance in this world with their eyes open, knowing that the real danger that's out there, and how do they combat it? But a large part of my story is that aspect of fatherlessness. So I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, and normative, unfortunately, in Western culture, where a lot of people grow up without dads in their home. My mom got pregnant with me pretty young, pregnant at 15, had me at 16. And what was unique about my upbringing was that because the town was so small, so contrast, this is South Carolina. You got Charlotte, Matthews, Monroe, and you cross the state line and you got the self-proclaimed watermelon capital of the world, Pageland, South Carolina. Like one grocery store, one gas station. So small that my dad, who I never had in my life or in my home, he was in that small town. So I would see him as I was getting older. And there were a few advancements on his part, trying to figure out how could he incorporate himself into my life. And, looking back on this, decades later, I have empathy for him in that this young man feeling shame, because as shame, it continues to exist, it compounds over time, and him not knowing what to do, and the enemy whispering in his ear. But what that looked like in my life was a young kid that was really confused because, I graduated with 100 people, and I was the only kid at my football and basketball and baseball games that didn't have a dad in the stands. I was the only person that I knew of that was playing basketball by themselves in their backyard. Throwing, I learned how to throw a football to receivers. I had different bushes who were running different routes. Um, and I was confused about that as I got younger. And uh, what almost made it more complicated was the fact that a few years after I was born, he gets married, has another family, and his family was not only more successful than my mom was. They literally lived beside his mom and dad, so all of a sudden they've got the nice home. They had multiple like Z71s like out in the yard. They lived on a farm and they lived beside his mom and dad. So all of a sudden, everything that I thought existed only in a Hallmark movie, because I certainly didn't have it in my life, I thought I should have access to, but something in me made me believe, well, maybe I was disqualified from that because I was not good enough. What's wrong with me? And it grew from curiosity to frustration. And then, all men are, have this God given characteristic to be high achievers. And if it's in, that aspect of your personality, if it's surrendered and submitted to the person of Jesus Christ, it can be a great thing. You can, have great work ethic. You can do good work. You can, these things can be positive in your life if they're leading you to do good things. But through the lens of insecurity and brokenness, I believe that if I had enough, that I would feel like I was enough. So I sought out to be, the best student, the best athlete. And I thought, well, if I did those things, it would make me feel some sort of way. And I was trying to mitigate my broken heart. And if I'm honest, the thing that I wanted to hear was, son, I'm proud of you.
Mhm.
And because I never heard that, I thought, well, if I could get enough yeses from girls and pats on the back and high fives and awards and accolades, I thought maybe, just maybe, that would fill the gap. And like every momentary high, it worked for a moment, but when that high it leveled back out, you actually felt more low, because you don't have anyone to celebrate that
Well,
win with.
And that had to be, so that had to be an interesting dynamic because so my parents got divorced when I was young, but my dad was still involved in my life, but he also lived 500 miles away, so I saw him during the
Mm.
summers and the winters. But as much as it wasn't ideal, there was still this structure, and I kind of understood the nature of the structure. But you're growing up in a situation where, again, your dad's in town. It's not like you don't know where he's
Yeah.
at. It's not like it's not like he couldn't see you more regularly. And you're doing all those things that you would think, as any boy watching TV, you would think if I do these things, right, if I'm playing football and if I'm doing this and I'm a good athlete, like, those are things that are going to make my dad proud. I know because all my other buddies' dads are proud. So
Yeah.
why isn't, and that had to be, that had to be a incredibly difficult dynamic. It's already difficult, but that just had to
Yeah.
add to it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And it, what was, because what was in me, it's almost like, um, hoping for something that is probably not going to happen. And that hope that you have is like, so for me to explain this best, so my mom did get married when I was 7, and from 7 to 11, she was married to this horrific person. He was abusive, drug addict. Um, but the good thing that came out of it was my brother.
Mm.
And the thing that really marked him was the inconsistency and the broken promises, where after they were divorced, he would promise, "Hey, I'm going to show up," and then he wouldn't show up, and then he would show up, show up, show up, and then not show up, not show up. He would get arrested and disappear for months. And I think that for me, in a similar way, as I remember him so clearly, you know, with in the South, with the screen door, with the wood door open and the screen door closed, and looking out the screen door, waiting on his dad to come pick him up at 10 o'clock because he said he would. And then 10:30 comes, 11 o'clock comes, 11:30, 12 o'clock, still looking out the door. He's pacing, but still looking, still hoping, but he never shows up. In the same way, every award ceremony, every game, I'm hopeful, but my hopes started to dissipate over time. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just chase after this feeling of I'm good enough. And maybe that just has to be good enough in itself because he never showed up.
Yeah. So you're experiencing this growing up, small town, and you're being relatively successful within that sporting environment and
Yeah.
whatnot. So you're getting positive feedback, but you're not getting positive feedback from your father. You're not getting any engagement from your dad. And like you said, it's this idea of highs and lows because there's something missing that isn't going to be answered just by kind of these temporary accolades. But how does that translate into what you plan to do? Like, as you're getting closer to like high school ending and whatnot, how does that translate into, again, trying to find something to replace what was needed from your dad?
Yeah. So for me, I I started modeling and acting also when I was around 13, 14 years old. And interestingly enough, that was the first time that I saw pornography.
Wow.
And this had a really it was interesting because all of a sudden I was invited into a more nuanced world. Because growing up in a small town, it's like I wasn't exposed to different environments, different foods, different travel and things like that. So all of a sudden that became an aspect of my life, and that just, if I'm honest, that became a new dopamine hit of choice. It became a new drug of choice. Um, and then when I saw pornography around that same time, it made me very curious in that I'd never seen love between a husband and a wife demonstrated.
Mm.
So for someone that wanted to be loved, I thought that when I saw this interaction in a magazine between a guy and a girl, I thought, well, maybe that's what love is.
Yeah.
That's why, Romans 2, 12, 2 is so important. You're either being conformed by the world or you're being transformed by the renewal of your mind. It's either the world is going to educate you, or we're going to cling to scripture being true, and we're going to allow God's truth to supersede what the world says.
But
And
but I can just say real good, that's so this is an interesting point that I think people that maybe haven't experienced don't quite understand. And when I say experience, I mean experience at that age and within that context. Because if you're growing up in an environment where you for relatively speaking, loving mom, loving dad, somewhat stable environment,
Yeah.
you might be exposed to something like that. And even though the exposure itself is bad, you view it through a different lens. But if you're exposed to it, not only at your age, but under the conditions that you were, this isn't just, oh, this is kind of a spicy thing to view. This is actually informing your view of what, and not just, again, not porn in the way we think of it. This is actually informing the way you think about an appropriate male-female relationship.
Yeah. I mean, literally, I went from, for the way that impacted my life, it wasn't a catalyst for me being addicted to pornography. It was a catalyst for me saying, okay, I've got, opportunities to go on dates with these girls and doing all these things. All of a sudden I thought, well, if I engage with women in that way, maybe I will feel the thing that I'm searching for. And so, yeah, like to your point, in a real way, I saw that as an educational component in me starting to understand, well, maybe if I don't feel loved or I'm not experiencing what I want or what I need, maybe if I experience this aspect of intimacy, then I will feel closer, close enough to that person, or maybe in some way I will feel loved in a way that I don't. Because I mean, what you said is true. Like my mom, amazing, but the practicality of a single mom providing for a family is she worked a ton, and she worked in the restaurant industry. So she didn't work a 9 to 5. She worked like a 10 to 7 or 8, sometimes 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
So that was tough.
Well, and let's face it, if you're a successful athlete in a small town and you're picking up modeling gigs at 30, this was, by the way, not my experience. You're picking up modeling gigs at like 13 and 14 years old. That's taking you out of town or taking you out of their environments. That's I mean, you have a lack of supervision just by the practical necessity that your mom needs to work, but you're also trying to find opportunities, and she's probably excited that you're getting opportunities. But man, that's a lot of pressure on a kid trying to make sense of the world.
Oh, certainly. And if I'm honest, it was crushing me. And
what do you mean by that?
I think that when you pursue something and you achieve it, and when you pursue something that you think is going to give you something, and then you achieve it and it doesn't make you feel like you thought it would,
Gotcha.
it's pretty demoralizing. When you pursue this conquest, you pursue the girl that no one can get, or if the thing that you wish that you had. I mean, to put it in a sense that outside of my own life, it's like to the person that is struggling with pornography, and they think like, well, the pornography addiction is going to go away when I get married because I'm actually going to have sex, and I've been good, right? So I haven't had any kind of sex with a person, but I've had these this sexual immorality in my life for so long. But I'm in this disbelief of if I have a wife, then this negative behavior is just gonna all of a sudden magically be eradicated from my life. It's this disillusionment that comes with sin. It's like, well, if I had the right truck, if I had the right title, if I had the right job, if I had more money, if I had more influence, if I had more, or something, whatever that thing is, when it doesn't make you feel like you thought it would when you achieve it, it levels you.
Yeah.
And I experienced that many times.
So
yet I found myself continuing going back over and over again.
So, and I mean, which is kind of understandable, because if you're looking for something that's going to make you feel validated and like appreciated for what you do, then you go to the areas where you're at least getting some appreciation. So how do you go from again, kind of doing this and being introduced to this world in South Carolina, how does that take you all the way out to the West Coast?
Yeah. So for about 2 years, so I went to college in Florence, South Carolina. So Francis Marion University. Went there, studied theater for a while, joined a fraternity, did all the things. And really, I was just trying to have a good time. And if I'm honest, and in the middle of that, I started to have more success as a model, which was if I'm honest, it was frustrating because the thing that I want to be success the thing that I wanted to be successful doing was acting.
Mm.
Yet that was something that didn't come as easily, and the opportunities didn't come in the frequency in which modeling did. So I just kind of like, okay, I'll ride this ship, but hopefully I'll get to where I want to go, because those worlds are somewhat interconnected. Um, but I had an agent that I had worked with a little bit in the mainstream world, and a talent, a talent agent, and she ultimately said, "Hey, I think that you're doing great. You got a good look, and your resume is decent, but if you were in closer proximity to the industry in which you want to be a part of, then the frequency in which you would be working
Mhm.
would increase. So, to make it practical, if you move to either LA, New York, or Miami, then that would be advantageous for your career. And LA seemed like it made sense for me, specifically Hollywood. So I dropped out of college the second semester of my sophomore year and moved to Hollywood. And this agent signed me, and everything happened that she said would. Like I started working a decent amount, and but at the same time, I'm not comparing my success to the things in which I'm experiencing. I'm looking to my left or right, and the people around me were having more success, or they seemed to be, because they had a level of contentment or joy that I didn't have. And more, or like whatever it was never enough, and I always felt left out or looked over. And that led to me living a lifestyle that was, that there's people who spend more money than they make, and then there were me. Like I was living far beyond my means. I had to be the guy with a table. I had to be getting bottles. I had to be at whatever place that had just opened up, or in Vegas or LA or whatever. And that led to me needing to make more money than I was making. So it made sense for a lot of people, like in that field, to work at bars or like hotel bars or restaurants and or clubs in LA. And there it was more like, hey, let me see your headshot and contrast your resume, because really it was a networking opportunity. And people there were seasonal, and they were really there to kind of get by or meet someone or whatever. But I'm in this place, and while I'm there, three girls walk in, and essentially they were headhunters from the porn industry. And they asked me, "Hey, would you be interested in meeting with our agent? And I know that you're passionate about this, and this is something that I get the opportunity to speak all over, and predominantly in churches. And I think language is so important." And they used language that broke down barriers, that because I was susceptible to manipulation, they used familiar language with me, that I said yes to things that I ought not say yes to. And they said, "Hey, we want you to meet with our agent. He's at this studio, and he will talk to you about maybe going on an audition." And I knew I should have said no, but if I'm honest, I was living in a way that wasn't that different than what you would see in
Yeah.
a porn film. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll just meet with the guy. Like, what harm could it do? And if I go to meet this guy, and he's in like a roach motel in the middle of nowhere, like picking lint out of his belly button, I'm just gonna like hightail it out of there. But I get there, and it's this very nice studio adjacent to Universal Studios, right off of a Hollywood Bowl. in this very prominent area in Studio City. And I walk in, and receptionist, and wait here, and you'll meet with this guy. And I sit down. He was very forward. He asked me 3 questions. He said, how did you grow up? What are you doing in LA? And what you hope to accomplish? And in retrospect, he wanted ammunition so that he could have a conversation, contextually, so that he could say what I would need to hear for me to do what he wanted me to do.
So let me
And
back up one second here, because I think this is important. You said so initially. You're at a club or something like that in LA, and you get approached by the 3 women that are headhunters, and they like you kind of identified, they knew exactly what to say to you to get you to consider what they were
sure,
putting down. Because so right off the bat, they understand that they're asking you to do something that's outside the norm. You
sure,
understand that you're being asked to do something outside the norm, but they know how to talk to you, and it becomes easy to justify based off of the things that the way you're already living your life at that point doesn't seem all that different, except you're not getting paid and it's not getting filmed.
sure.
And so again, you come up, there's these justifications, and we all do this. Like, we all do this in our lives with a million different things. But I'm just trying to get an idea for how this process goes, because there are so many people that will try to say, oh, this is just normal and sex work is work and no big deal. If that was true, they wouldn't have needed to approach you the way they did. He wouldn't
Yeah,
have needed to ask you the questions that he did. And I
yeah,
find it fascinating. I have never been to a job interview, not once, where the first question out of someone's mouth was, how did you grow up?
yeah,
So did
yeah.
you see that as him just being friendly, or was there any sort of red flag associated with that?
I mean, I should have, but I mean, I think in a way, I was kind of captivated by the moment. Maybe a little nervous. So I think that because I was not self-aware in that moment, I was so insecure that every time I engaged with someone, I thought that I had something to prove.
Got it.
If
How old were
if
you?
I would say 22.
Oh my
um,
gosh.
so if I mean, I would say, like, from, like, 22 to really even, like, all of my 20s and some of my teens, it's like, I would describe it as, Kurt Lazarus. Like, I was a dude playing a dude disguised as another dude that didn't know what dude he was. Like,
Yeah.
because I called it a first date mask. So I didn't think I had anything truly valuable to offer. So what I would often do when I would interact with women, and even friends, I would examine them and hear what they had to say, and I would try to become who I thought they wanted me to be, so that they would like me, because I thought if they actually knew who I was, I would be that same kid that got rejected by their dad.
Got it.
So, he's asking me, how did you grow up? I grew up just me and my mom. So he's looking for ammunition to manipulate someone. Okay, he comes from a broken home. He's looking for something he doesn't have. Why are you in LA? I'm here to model, act, be in this creative space. So really nothing there. And then, so interestingly enough, I think is the most intriguing. The third thing he said, what do I hope to accomplish, from being out here? And I said, I hope to be famous. And
Huh.
it's so interesting because famous is vague. It's not real. It's kind of the same thing as, like, being rich, because what quantitates being famous, what quantitates being rich? There's no, even if you attach a metric to it, it's somewhat fictional, because there's no, there's no, like, set, like, okay, if you do that, you achieve this.
Mhm.
And I thought, well, if enough people like me, if enough people knew me, if I did enough, maybe then I would feel like I was enough. And so interesting that you said what you said a minute ago, because the shame that's associated with it, and this obvious, this is not, normative behavior. um After he says, okay, you're going to be the guy, he says, the porn industry is shifting to parodying these big films, and because you have acting experience, that's going to be advantageous for you, so you'll be the lead in these films. You'll make a lot of money. You'll be successful. Everyone will know your name. And it's like, okay, okay, okay. Oh, and then by the way, the first thing you're going to do, no one goes by their real name. The first thing we're going to do is choose a pseudonym in which you're going to go by. That in itself points to, if it's so cool and if it's so amazing, why is the first thing you do choose another name to go by? It's because there's this innate level of shame
Mm.
that's associated with it that you don't even have to speak about. It's like thinking about, if someone sent you an inappropriate picture when you were at the library and you had your phone and you saw it and someone walked by, you would immediately turn it down. And it's because there's something in you that just knows, this is inappropriate. This is off. There's something not right about that. And I just find it so interesting that no one in that industry goes by their name. The first thing they do is they choose a name to cover up their real name because they don't want their true likeness to be associated with that behavior.